Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim. I am with Rudder Marketing. You are listening to the Aviation Business Podcast. Today we have a special guest. It's the EAA, the Experimental Aircraft Association. So I don't know if you heard about them. If you're a pilot, maybe you haven't. Maybe you have. I hope you have. But really, we're honored to have our guest Sean on here. Before I let him speak and let him do an introduction, this podcast is brought to you by Rudder Marketing. We are a marketing agency for flight schools. We help flight schools all across the country grow and scale their businesses. So if you are looking to grow and scale your business, make sure you reach out to Rudder Marketing. Check us out at ruddermarketing.com. All right, without further ado, let's introduce our guest speaker here. So Sean, welcome to the podcast. Can you give us a small introduction and tell us who you are?
Yeah, thanks, guys. Sean Elliott. I'm the Vice President of Advocacy and Safety at EAA, and I've been at EAA just under 30 years. It'll be 30 years next April. So great organization, and if any of your listeners aren't exactly familiar with EAA, they probably have heard of Oshkosh. So that's where we're headquartered and based.
So you're all the way in Wisconsin. Okay, I didn't know that.
We are, you bet.
I just thought that you had this. So I have a question for you, just as a general pilot meeting with the EAA for the first time. Why Oshkosh, Wisconsin? Just out of anywhere in the USA, why did we choose Oshkosh, Wisconsin to be like the main?
There's actually a very clear answer to that, and not a lot of people know it. So our founder, Paul Poborezny, was an officer and a leader in the Air National Guard, and back in the 60s. He was obviously very active flying tankers and transports and fighters, but a lot of large aircraft flying. And when the event at the time was in Rockford, Illinois. That's where the first early years, not exactly the first year, but the many early years of the event, the membership fly-in and convention for EA members was in Rockford. And Paul knew that they needed to expand and they needed to grow, and there were some issues at Rockford. And he flew over with a close friend of his, Jack Marks. They flew over the Oshkosh Whitman Regional Airport, and they saw from the air that it had two very large runways that were not interconnected. The runways here at Oshkosh, you've got 927 and then 1836, and they make a T, and basically they don't touch. So he saw that and he realized, hey, we could run arrival flows to both runways, and without having them cross concrete like that, you're not going to have any problems as far as interruptions or flow issues. And then he saw all the surrounding land and opportunity, and he said, this could make a good place. Here we are all these years later, and moved here in 1970.
1970, yeah, because for me, my experience is very limited. So I joined the aviation industry probably about 5 years ago around COVID. So I had, started my career actually in manufacturing, and then kind of got done with my career. Not really done, but I was like, hey, I'm kind of at this point where I want to change my career. Aviation was kind of one of the ones that I've always been interested in, and I started pursuing it. One thing led to another, and here we are. We're talking to the EAA. Pretty cool experience from my end. Okay, so we kind of gave a small introduction about you and your role in EAA. What about even before that? So how did you get involved with aviation, and how did you know aviation was the best thing for you?
Oh my, grew up around it. My parents were both into aviation. My dad was a World War II naval aviator and taught me to fly. I soloed on my 16th birthday in Erie, PA back in 1983.
Nice.
I have just over 11,000 hours total flight time, and examiner, instructor, a lot of instructional background. I worked at Embry-Riddle as an instructor, an examiner, and then ultimately a training manager before I moved here. Sharing aviation, sharing the passion of aviation, and see people really get that spark and get that bug in their system. It's something I've been doing my whole life, and it's very rewarding.
Yeah. What I like doing is whenever I go to a flight school, where there's one of my flight schools that work with us, or just a flight school I fly out of, or anyone, what I love doing is when someone comes in for a discovery flight and their eyes are it's like, for me, I've been flying for a bit, and I know people that have way more experience with me. We get a little, I don't say we lose the passion, but we get a little jaded. We've seen it before, we've flown, but then seeing someone just walk in for the first time and then doing a discovery flight or going into a small aircraft for the first time, it's seeing them light up is just amazing. It's an amazing feeling to be part of that.
It reminds you of why we do what we do. Exactly.
Exactly right. So you were the EAA. You've been there for, you said 30 years? Is that right?
This next April will be 30 years. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Happy work anniversary.
Thank you.
One of the biggest topics that and one of the reasons why I think you reached out to Right Rudder to get on the show is you have a lot of changes that happened in MOSAIC and the FAA and regulations, right? So I know there's a reauthorization bill that came out like a little while ago, and then at Oshkosh this year there was a kind of a presentation on MOSAIC. So there's a lot of questions in the industry, especially with the flight school market and ab initio programs, about how does that affect flight schools in our program. So I kind of want to dissect this in I guess a strategic way, because there's different aspects of MOSAIC, like the aircraft certification and also the pilot certification process that have been modified, right? So let's tackle one at a time. Let's talk about let's start with pilots. So for the longest time, there was the recreational pilot, the sport pilot, then of course your regular private instrument commercial CFI, ATP. What did MOSAIC do, and also when did the changes of come into place? I think there's a lot of stuff going on. So break it down as simple as you can, as far as just focusing on the pilot part. What are the changes and timelines regarding them?
Sure. So it's been over a 10-year effort to ultimately see a final rule get published, which is what occurred at AirVenture this year. Is the FAA announced the final rule, and it went to the federal docket with an implementation date. And for pilots, that date is coming up next week. It's the 22nd of October. And basically it's this. It's redefined in a game-changing way what the definition of what a sport pilot is eligible to fly. So not only light sport aircraft, which that's a wonderful enhancement that we'll talk about in a little bit as far as the aircraft manufacturing side, but for sport pilots and higher certificate holders that want to act as a sport pilot or exercise their sport pilot privileges on their higher certificate for the benefits that go with that. It's a game changer. It basically now entails any airplane that has 4 seats or less, has a maximum speed, a VH speed of 250 knots, which is really irrelevant. There's nothing out there that bumps up against that I'm aware of, unless you get into airplanes that don't meet any other parameter. And most importantly, a change in the stall speed to 59 knots indicated or calibrated airspeed, calibrated clean, so VS1 stall speed. So any airplane now that's 4 seats, 59 knots, clean stall speed, calibrated, now with again, as I said, no higher than 250 knot max speed or VH speed, now can be looked at as an airplane that a sport pilot can fly. So that's not just carte blanche. If you have an airplane that's got a constant speed propeller or retractable gear, it still requires, just as a private pilot would have a requirement, appropriate training and an endorsement from a qualified instructor, so that you are then eligible to fly that kind of airplane as well. But it really opens the aperture for what sport pilots can operate, or other higher pilots exercising their privileges of a sport pilot can operate with a driver's license medical requirement. So it really changes so much. It changes the flight training picture. It changes the recreational current pilot picture. It lowers the cost of flying, and it simplifies things in a very beneficial way. And for anybody out there that's saying, well, wait a minute, is this unsafe or is this less safe? No, it literally takes the appropriate tasks in an airman certification standards, applies them to a pilot training process called Sport Pilot, and you still have to train to meet that standard and ultimately take a test with an examiner that demonstrates that you're proficient at that, meeting that standard in all of those tasks. So is it less task? Yes, but the tasks are focused on the kind of flying that your privileges as a sport pilot enable. So it really isn't any change, and the data supports that. From a safety standpoint, it's only going to enhance and enable. It's a great accomplishment, like I said, that's been brewing for over 10 years.
Okay. really quick, I forgot to do some housekeeping too. So we have about 11 people on the call on this podcast recording right now. So like I said, this is going to be syndicated out. We'll put it on Spotify and YouTube and all this stuff. But for those folks that are here with us live right now, if you have questions, I have my own set of questions that I've already prepared in advance. But for those listening, if you want to ask directly to the EAA, Sean Elliott, some questions, there is a chat button on your right side of the screen. Enter your question there, and we'll try to address it as it comes up. And also, if you want to go on camera and you have a mic set up, we're more than willing to. There's a button on the bottom of the screen that you can click the button, and we'll let you in, and you can start talking to me and Sean as well. Wait, sorry, forgot about that in the beginning. To kind of go back to what we were talking about regarding the sport pilot privileges. Let's say I'm a private pilot, right? Let's say I'm a private pilot. I have my instrument rating, commercial, sure. Why would someone like me, want to exercise sport pilot privileges if I already have a private or commercial or anything like that?
Well, let's say that there is an underlying medical condition that's developed with age or with something associated with holding your third-class medical certificate. Less than 2% of the pilot population is unable to get that certificate rectified and fixed by going through the FAA special issuance process. So there is a good process for that. However, if you can address the issue with your doctor and you have not had a medical that's been denied or revoked, you can fly as a sport pilot as long as you know you are medically fit to do so and that you are confident that you are safe to complete all the elements of that flight. That's under 6153. That is significantly different than meeting the medical certificate requirements, which is if you hold a medical certificate and you have a condition that has developed that renders you ineligible for that certificate without getting a special issuance, you have to stop flying and then ultimately have to go through the special issuance process. As I said, is that hard? It varies. It's certainly not pleasant, but most impactfully, it's expensive. All of the tests, all of the things that go with getting through that special issuance process can be in a magnitude of thousands and thousands of dollars to accomplish that. So if you're able to rectify your own condition with your family doc or a specialist and determine that you meet the requirements of 6153, meaning you're safe to conduct that flight, and you haven't had a medical that's been denied or revoked, you can go fly using sport pilot privileges. Now, you can only carry one passenger. That's a typical sport pilot limitation. But how often, Tim, do you fly with more than one person?
To be honest with you, it's been a few years.
Hey.
So I've had a full cabin. I usually fly 4-seaters, and the most I've ever had was 4 people with me, or 3 plus me, so it's 4 people. But that happens like once in a blue moon. And at that point, I'm looking at fuel. I don't really want to fly this. I have to look at fuel. And a 172, it's kind of, you gotta get a half tank or something like that for 4 full-grown adults. And a Cessna 172, definitely no full tanks. So I'm already doing calculations in my head. It's tedious. I don't really like it. So the answer is, when I first started off, I thought I'd be flying everybody. I think this is everyone's pilot journey. Like, oh, I got my license. Come fly with me. And everyone's like, oh yeah, let's go flying. And then what actually happens is 100 people message you on on Facebook, whatever, say, hey, let's go flying one day. And I say, yeah, let's do it. And when it comes to actually scheduling a date, they chicken out. And honestly, not many people fly with you. I don't know if that's anyone else's experience, but that's my experience. I promise you, I'm a good, safe pilot.
Oh yeah, I have no doubt. And that's the other beauty of this. So in the past, when people have come across that scenario that I just described, a lot, that we're talking thousands of pilots, went the route of, well, I'm going to go ahead and exercise my sport pilot privileges, and I'm going to have to get checked out in a quote-unquote light sport aircraft, which up until this change called MOSAIC, was a significantly different handling aircraft, a much lighter wing loading, much more responsive on the controls, much more pitch sensitive. They're not bad, but they're different. And it proved to be difficult for some people to make that transition to an LSA of the time. Now people will be able to stay in their own 172 and their own Piper Cherokee, name your type of GA airplane that they can stay right in, they're comfortable with, they're proficient in, and simply make that transition and not have to go down the special issuance process. So that's exciting. Even more exciting is what this really means to the flight training world, and causing people that have for years dreamt about learning to fly flip that switch and say, I can really do this. Because if you really look at it, no matter whether it's by the numbers of the regulatory requirements or by the actual reality of how much time it actually takes to obtain a private pilot certificate versus obtaining a sport pilot certificate, it's about half the time. Well, the folks we work with here, we have our own Sport Pilot Academy. Folks just down the road in Cub Air in Hartford, Wisconsin, it's between 40 and 50 hours to get a sport pilot certificate. What's the average to get a private pilot right now? 70 to 80?
70, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes higher. So it's a significant cost savings to be able to obtain a certificate that's appropriate and aimed for the kind of flying that a recreational pilot wants to do. Like you just described, carrying one person at the most of the time, it fits really well to reinvigorate recreational flying and causing people to chase that dream and cause it to become a reality.
I'm gonna play the part of being a really stupid pilot. Let's say I don't know nothing about regulation and nothing about this changes. So I might know some stuff. I'm gonna pretend I don't.
Okay.
Um, if I'm a private pilot right now, can I just starting October 22nd, I think's the date. Can I just start exercising sport pilot privileges, or do I need to take a test? What's the process to do this?
So it depends. It depends on the kind of airplane that you intend to fly. If you're going to stay in your same old 172 and you've been flying the 172 and you got a current flight review and you've met the currency requirements in the 172, you literally, with one passenger and flying in the conditions that you are capable of flying, VFR day, and if you're night qualified, I don't think for a sport pilot, you have to get an endorsement now to fly at night that will become after the next week on the 22nd. But a private pilot, you've already got that training and qualifications. So as long as you're current, you'd be able to do so. There's nothing new you have to do. You simply exercise those privileges as a sport pilot.
Okay. And then you also mentioned some stuff regarding the sport pilot and then medical stuff. So I think one of the biggest things is about the medical stuff. I think that's where a lot of people talk about it. Is this any different than basic med, or is this it sounds kind of similar? So you need to work with your physician. It sounds very similar to basic med.
It does have all the good elements of basic med, but it is different. So it literally is simply a driver's license medical requirement. So if you have a valid driver's license in the state that you live in, you hold your medical requirements to go fly as a sport pilot. If you have an issue around safety of flight, you have to work with your family physician. You're the medical expert that you are most familiar with, to make sure that you've appropriately addressed whatever that is before you can then go fly.
Does the doctor have to sign any paperwork that gets submitted to the FAA?
No, there's no paperwork requirement. It's simply abiding by and complying with 61.53, which says you as the pilot in command are ultimately responsible to ensure that you can conduct all portions of that flight in a safe manner. Okay, so you are required to ensure that you're safe to do so. But there's no letter. It's not the doctor saying it. You are saying it. You're having to go to the doctor to validate that you are right, but you are the one as the PIC saying that.
And how often do we need to get a medical exam from our family?
Valid current driver's license. That's it.
Oh, so there's nothing less. So it's even looser than basic med in that case a little bit.
Well, so here's the way we really look at it, and this really makes sense. This is put some logic to it. It fits on the safety continuum, right? Safety continuum, an upgoing curve. You know, the lowest risk is passenger carrying operations for comp or hire, and then all the way down here is where we see recreational flying, and then at the very end there's ultralights, right, where there's no certification requirement, there's no medical requirement, and then you got gliders and things that, hot air balloons and things that kind of come up that continuum. This kind of fills that gap of where basic med really provides for now aircraft up to 12,500 pounds below 10,000 feet with a family visit, a training course. Carrying that paperwork in your logbook. This is below that. This is a driver's license medical that you're complying with 6153 and operating under sport pilot privileges, either as a sport pilot or as a Hiler certificate holder with only one passenger. That's the factor that makes this fit in the risk continuum. So it really rounds it out in a very effective way from a recreational flying standpoint.
Okay. One of the biggest concerns I've seen from flight schools is we didn't mention it at all, but insurance.
Hmm.
So like a flight school needs to get certain types of insurance to run their operations.
Yep.
I don't think as of current, maybe some insurance companies have updated their policies. But I don't think there's any policies right now that insures a flight school for like liability or general business liability and all that type of stuff, or hull damage and things like that, for a sport pilot just yet. So I think is that currently one of the main concerns with
So
this thing rolling out as
we, we've,
insurance?
we've talked to several of the underwriters, and even as recently as this morning. And the bottom line is, from some of the biggest companies out there, they're saying the requirement for a medical certificate is moot. It's all about what's required for the certificate and the training is taking place for, and ensuring that all of those requirements are met. At least the folks we're talking with, they have the provisions and the abilities in their policies today to enable this to happen, both from a commercial flight school standpoint as well as an individual private owner standpoint.
Yeah, I just got an email from, I think, a Vemco. Was it like earlier this week? They're talking about a MOSAIC right now. So I think this is a very hot topic, and I think a lot of people just don't know, I guess, what to do about it. So
Well, we were just talking with Star Aviation this morning, and
okay.
there were the folks that very clear, and they're a pretty big underwriter. There were the folks that clearly said, no, it's not a factor for us. We're not concerned about it.
So all this takes effect, I guess, next week on the
It does.
22nd.
The 22nd,
So,
big milestone date from our standpoint.
so if I was, let's just put my change the situation. So I went from stupid pilot to flight school owner.
All right.
So I'm a flight school owner, and I heard about this MOSAIC stuff back in Oshkosh, and now I hear Tim talking about this on his podcast. So I know this is something I got to address. What is your advice or guidance for flight school owners across the country regarding MOSAIC, and what should they do to cater to the new market that's going to be potentially opening up for them?
Tim, that's a great question. So first, let's talk about making sure that flight school owners understand where their key problems lie today and how this could in fact address that, right? What's a big problem right now in the flight training world? Dropout rate. What's the average dropout rate percentage wise? Purchase 70% in some cases,
Yes,
right?
I said higher.
It's high. It's high.
80, 90.
Well, why is that? There's a multitude of reasons. The time it takes to get the certificate, the cost, instructor turnover, all of those things. So what does MOSAIC do to address that? A lot, right? If I can do a sport pilot certificate in literally a 6-week period instead of a year-long period for a private, if I can retain instructors, because by the way, this also enables sport pilot instructors. So now we can take experienced sport pilots with 150 hours in their logbook, and with passing a written training and passing a check ride, they can become a sport pilot instructor that can instruct sport pilots. So I could have both a cadre of regular CFIs and sport pilot CFIs that will absolutely help curtail my turnover problem, especially when the airlines are really hot, right? Because sport pilots, by the way, the sport pilot instructors not trying to build time to go to a job. They want to instruct just to instruct. So that's a major factor. If I can turn people over with a certificate in their pocket in 6 to 7 weeks of time frame, that's heavy. Our Sport Pilot Academy does it in just over 3.5. So 6 to 7 weeks, let's say on average. What's that going to do to the retention rate? Are people more likely to stay with it if they can actually finish a certificate and say, hey, look, I'm a pilot. I actually accomplished this. I think I want to go on and do the private and the instrument. I want to pursue other certificates and ratings now because I got this first one under my belt. It's going to be a game changer from that aspect too. Also, from just a marketing standpoint, if I'm a flight school and I want to bring people off the street that have always dreamt of learning to fly but never pulled the trigger because they thought it was either A, unachievable, B, too expensive, or C, too difficult, I just mitigated 80% of that. Costs way down. Difficulty significantly improved. Ability and affordability significantly improved. So flight schools ought to be able to rethink how they're approaching attracting people to actually pull the trigger and learn to fly, and have a really great stepping stone approach that brings people in and keeps them going and doesn't turn them away 70% of the time.
I want to go back to that instructor thing. So you said that you can become a sport instructor. Is this any different than the CFI requirements that currently exist? So, for example, CFI requirements, you need to get like fundamentals of instruction. You need to pass that exam, the written exam for that. You need a commercial certificate usually to be a CFI.
That's what Sport Pilot eliminates. It eliminates the commercial. You still have to pass the fundamentals of instruction. You still have to take an appropriate practical, test and have that 150 hours of time. And it's a very focused certificate. A Sport Pilot instructor is focused to be able to take someone that has a reasonable level of experience as a sport pilot, elevate them from an instructor knowledge standpoint, and focus them on simply training sport pilots. They can't train privates. They can't train instrument. They can't train commercial. It's only somebody who can go out and train somebody to become a sport pilot.
That's new. I didn't know about that one. That's a new one. I did my own research. I did not hear about this sport pilot instructor.
It's very cool.
The requirements for this is 150 hours total time, I guess?
150 hours total time as a sport pilot.
It's very low. I qualify for that.
Well,
hey,
I can't tell you. So you bring that up.
Sport instructor, call me, give me a call.
We got quite a few private pilots here at EAA that are saying, I don't want to take the time to go and get my commercial and my instrument and all the time and expense that goes along with that. But, I wouldn't mind giving back, and I think I could become a good teacher. I'd like to go for that. And that's what Sport Pilot Instructor is going to enable. It's going to enable people that want to give back, want to teach others, and want to be good at that, and aren't trying to do it for other reasons about, job building or career building or anything.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems I think that's in the industry right now. And I understand that we had to do something with the Colgan air crash and all that stuff, but I'm seeing right now a lot of CFIs. Oh, sorry.
By the way, that Sport Pilot Instructor, that's not new. That's been around since the first version in 2004. The aperture widened up with MOSAIC and the redefinition of what a sport pilot can fly. But that Sport Pilot Instructor element, that's been around for 20 years.
So, okay. So there's two different kind of, let's bring it back to the, pilot versus plane.
Yep.
I guess, contradiction here. So in one sense, starting next week, I as a private pilot can now fly a Cessna 172 as a sport pilot. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, that aircraft was certificated for normal usage, not for sport usage, right? So is there?
So that's a great question. I think I know where you're going.
Okay.
And that's a really important question. Here's one of the challenges. For the last 20 years, people have tied sport pilot and light sport aircraft at the hip. We have to break that apart. It is now about what is a sport pilot eligible to fly and what is the manufacturing process for a light sport aircraft. If I have a 172, is it eligible for a sport pilot to fly it? Yes, it is. However, you have to maintain the airplane based on its certification basis. So it's still a standard category 172. It still needs to be maintained by an A&P. It still needs to have an annual inspection done by an IA, inspection authorization on an A&P. All of those things that are part of that certification basis of that airplane still exist. So it doesn't magically change a 172 into a light sport aircraft. That is wrong. People have, unfortunately, misnomered that and think, wow, now my 172 is a light sport. No, it simply is a standard category 172 that now a sport pilot is eligible to operate because it meets the eligibility requirements for sport pilot to be able to do so. It doesn't change the cert basis of the airplane. I
think you said, I like how you said it, they were tied in the hip. Because for me, when I was doing my training, I'm still training, my take on it was, okay, if I want to be a sport pilot, I can only fly LSA planes. And I think that's what it was prior to this change, right?
It really wasn't, but it was genuinely thought of that way. Because remember, you could fly a Cub, you could fly a Luscombe, you could fly other Car 3 early vintage airplanes that met that weight requirement of the first generation, and you could operate those as a sport pilot. So it really was the same. It's just people didn't think of it that way. People thought of it as, wow, that's now an LSA. And it wasn't even back then. But now it's even more important to separate those two, break those apart. And remember, the airplane has a certification basis. That's how it must be operated and maintained, even though a sport pilot's eligible to go fly it, like a 172. A light sport aircraft may be manufactured, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that a sport pilot doesn't have the eligibility to fly. That's how decoupled the FAA has made it. They, with the new rule, because they wanted to enable new designs and lower cost processes for manufacturers to build new innovative light sport aircraft, they created a higher stall speed requirement for LSA so that you could have up to a 61 knot dirty design, a fully configured, full flap, gear down, 61 knot stall speed that can be manufactured as an LSA. And there's a lot of advantages from a manufacturing standpoint to be able to go down the light sport aircraft path versus a Part 23 certification path.
I guess that's kind of bridge the gap here and talk about the aircraft certification. So, what this start from the top. So, what are the changes? And so, I think before it was like a weight limit, right? It was like 3,000, 4,000 pounds.
The weight limit before was 1,320 pounds. 1,320 here.
So
yeah, that's okay.
Pounds,
look, let's put it this way. For me to fly a Gen 1 light sport aircraft at 1,320 pounds, I need an 8-year-old CFI because I'm Wisconsin size. The bottom line is it was very, very limiting to have that weight limit as part of the design criteria for what is both what is an LSA and what is a sport pilot eligible to fly.
And so now
that weight's gone. That weight, there's no more weight.
So there's no more weight. The only thing that makes it an LSA now is if it has a dirty stall speed of 61 knots.
For a manufacturer that wants to build a new type, they can use the ASTM design standards and go take their design to a full-blown, manufactured, certified, for sale airplane by following those ASTM standards. And that has a limitation of 4 seats, right? And a 61 knot dirty stall speed. So yeah, and 250 high, the max end, all of the numbers as far as the performance parameters, the 250 knot, not 59 now, but 61 for manufacturing. That's why I say you could now have an LSA that a sport pilot can't fly. And 4 seats. Those are all still in play for a manufacturer that wants to build a new design. They could have retractable gear. They could have constant peak prop. They could have electric. There's all kinds of things now that have been enabled with this rule change. It's important to decouple them because now what defines an LSA may or may not be eligible for a sport pilot to operate.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest paradigm shifts we need to have as a community is that, because I think in my training, it's always been, it's just not worth it. Like sport pilot stuff is just not worth it because you train 40 hours, 50 hours. It's about the same time. You can only fly. You have so many limitations. It's not worth it anymore. And then also back then, I was under the impression that as a sport pilot, I could only fly LSAs. So now with these changes, I think us as a community, we need to kind of have the knowledge, and I appreciate you kind of hopping on here to kind of share this with us. These are 2 different things, and I think those are two different things. Even we call it MOSAIC, but it's 2 different entirely things too.
It is. You got to separate them. That's the starting place. You have to mentally in your mind just break them apart and say, okay, LSA is one thing, and that's for manufacturers that want to build new airplanes and do so in a more affordable way, in a simplified way, using STM standards, and be able to put airplanes out on the street that'll have a better price point and the latest, greatest innovations for many levels of pilot certificate holders to be able to operate. In some cases, maybe not a sport pilot. In other cases, it may. Just depends on if it meets what's a sport pilot eligible aircraft.
So I guess to kind of sum it up. So I'm going to say I'm an instrument rated pilot. I can take an LSA. Can I fly that in instrument conditions?
Right now. Okay. And here's why. There's no ASTM standard that enables instrument flight for light sport aircraft. They are working on that, but we don't have it in place yet. So as of today, you cannot go fly IFR with a light sport aircraft. That could change down the road, but right now, no.
Okay, let's see here. So we talked about pilot certification, airplane certification. Is there something about, I don't know if this was part, I know when I was in, do a little reshift here. I remember when I first heard about MOSAIC, not first heard, but I heard about MOSAIC maybe, I think it was last year or something like that. I think another part of MOSAIC was about fuel. Was that also something that we're addressing in this one, or is this something different?
No, yeah, that's a whole nother elephant
That's a whole
in
different.
the
Okay,
room.
okay.
Yeah,
So
fuel,
right now it's
we're
just
involved with it, but fuel has nothing to do with Mosaic.
okay, okay. Because I wasn't sure. I was like, I know that there was like sustainable aircraft fuel. There's different types that are
So
moved from like 100
other
low lead
than it
phenols.
did, so the first generation, the first 20 years of light sport and sport pilot, and particularly light sport, did have a requirement of piston engine. That's gone. So we will see new designs that are innovative from a propulsion standpoint. And I'm talking electric, I'm talking turbine, who knows what we'll see, hybrid. There are no more limitations on you have to have a piston power plant if it's called an LSA.
See, okay. So yeah, so it's not the fuel stuff. Let's scratch that out because I know that was something that was bundled in all the stuff together.
Oh, it's a big issue, believe me. Fuel's a big
yeah,
issue, but not related to this.
okay. But then you also mentioned other types of propulsion too. So opening up this LSA, I don't want to say, is it not really a category? People semantics are very important with pilots. So I don't want to say class, category, or type without like saying it correctly. So correct me if I'm wrong. So if I'm an aircraft manufacturer or I'm experimental aircraft builder, I want to certificate my plane as a LSA. I am now eligible to not to just have piston stuff. I can also do electric and I don't know, turbine,
Yeah.
hydrogen fuel or something like
If
that.
you want to go design and develop and produce an airplane to ASTM standards under the light sport category, absolutely, you can go do so with any type of power plant.
Okay. So I think we kind of covered both the main, I guess, bundle of
So
MOSAIC.
one of the things,
We talked about pilot stuff. We talked about aircraft stuff. Did I miss another segment of this entire?
so one thing I didn't mention yet, Tim, that's my fault. It's important to also separate, like we talked about before, separate the pilot from the aircraft. The pilot rules are enacted next week, like we talked about already. The aircraft, i.e., enabling ASTM standards to develop new LSAs, that doesn't happen until July of next year. And that's because the ASTM committees are busy working on finishing those standards that will be applied to this new rule. So you'll see the light sport aircraft side of this, or light sport category is the correct
category. Okay.
term.
I was like, I don't know if it's class, category, type. But
it's light sport category. You'll see that become final next July. So there's a little more time frame to the aircraft side. But I would watch Oshkosh. Let's see what new designs are unveiled at Oshkosh next year, because it wouldn't surprise me if you see some manufacturers start to at least dip their toes in the water for some exciting new designs.
Okay, that'll be interesting. So, but then that launches on July
26.
26. July 26, 2026.
Yeah.
Rolls out the tongue very nice. July 26th of 2026. Okay.
I don't know if is it 26. I'm not sure the exact date, but it's July of 2026.
Okay. So we kind of covered both topics here. I want to open up not only the floor. You know, I know we have about 15 people now on live with us. So if there is questions, go ahead and put in the chat. Is there anything we missed, or what do you, Sean, want from, I guess, our community? So you know,
a couple of things.
A lot of business owners. What do you want us to do as flight schools?
As a flight school, I wanted to provide a couple of thoughts of good ideas to go think about and start pursuing and getting your arms around as a flight school owner. Remember, 5,000 hours dual given, a training manager at Embry-Riddle. I get it. I know the flight school world pretty well. So number one, go get yourself a sport pilot curriculum. If you're a flight school and you don't have a set up curriculum for sport pilot training, and it's significant segments of the private, it's just not all of the private. It's pretty easy to do, but get yourself enabled with having a curriculum on hand and start to get your flight instructors familiar with it. Develop your selling points. There's a whole new market to be had here with what this is enabling, and be prepared to reach out and educate folks as to why this is significant and can cause them to flip that switch and start learning to fly. Make sure your examiners, if you've got examiners in your area that you use on a regular basis, make sure they have sport pilot on their CLOA, on their authorizations as an examiner. And then flight schools, work with your local EAA chapters, both around Young Eagle rallies and Eagle Flight rallies, to provide that fundamental resource of, hey, you want to take it a step farther, come learn to fly at my flight school. We have over 900 chapters worldwide. There's probably one at your local airport. Partner up with them. We often see that happen where flight schools and EA chapters do events together, and are symbiotic. It benefits both, right?
Okay, a couple things that you mentioned there that kind of threw me off here. So DPEs is another big topic. So one of the biggest challenges we have at flight schools is having DPs and availability. The, there's so many slots that are available for DPs any given year. A lot of schools struggle, not all of them, but so a lot of the schools struggle getting a DP scheduled for their privates, instrument commercials. Now, if we start advertising for sport pilot stuff, these DPs that already are in the system, they have to additionally get, I guess, authorization in order to do a check ride.
For those that don't already have it, and it's a simple addition to your letter of authorization, your certificate letter of authorization, which is called a CLOA. So an examiner can simply go to their managing specialist at the FAA and say, I would like to add sport pilot authorization to my CLOA so that I can then conduct check rides for sport pilot. And they're already doing privates, which is almost what every examiner starts with. It's a no-brainer. It's not hard to do. The FAA has recognized the need for more DPs. They've added, I think, this last year alone, 200 additional slots. They're going to meet that. Last I had heard a month ago, they were going to meet that goal of having an additional 200 examiners on the ranks. And the big thing that's happened in the last couple of years, they did away with geographical barriers. So you can bring examiners in from any part of the country now to conduct check rides at your flight school. So there's a number of things that are in play right now or have happened recently that should be helping with examiner availability and being able to get that check ride scheduled in an effective manner.
Yeah, so I guess that's something that us as a flight school we have to address too. So if we want to start advertising, offering sport pilot stuff, there's I guess two things. One is developing a curriculum. So the second one is getting a DP that's actually able to have the authority to give a check ride.
Well, it's just a question of making sure the DP is aware, right? If I'm a DP and I'm not fully aware of what this means and how you're going to see a significant increase in sport pilot activity, I need to be educated. And it's a simple ask at that point to then go to your managing specialist and add it to your CLOA. But you want to make sure your DPs are aware of it and starting to think about it now. Don't wait until you got 5 sport pilots waiting for their check ride for the DP to go, oh crap.
Hold on, I gotta write this up.
Yeah, I can't do this yet. Get it taken care of now.
Another thing you mentioned is curriculum. It depends on where. Okay, so I think we have curriculum here. Then you also have Part 61 schools, Part 141 schools. There's different requirements for the curriculum. And then there's also different resources online for flight instructors and flight schools to use to give the curriculum to their students. So some schools develop their own. A lot of them use like King schools or sororities, something like that. Is there current, I'm playing the role of dumb pilot right now. Is there any resources out there?
Yes.
Or if I'm a flight school owner or a CFI that I want to start training people for sport pilot, is there anything that any resources that you can suggest?
Absolutely. So Sporties has a sport pilot curriculum. I believe Gleim does. There's several of the well-known industry providers for good documentation, good curriculum that you can reach out to now and get it. And I have a call in an hour with Sporties to hear the latest on where we're at with really ratcheting up there. So yeah, it's definitely out there and available. Or like you just said, you can also develop your own. That's what we did internally at EAA when we rolled out our Sport Pilot Academy about 4 years ago. We developed our own curriculum.
Yeah. I assume it's a lot of it, if you're a flight school owner or CFI, a lot of it is going. Is it called the PTS or ACS for this one?
ACS now.
It's
Airline Certification Centers, ACS. That's right.
Okay, so I got to look at the ACS for sport pilot requirements and then build my curriculum based on that.
Yeah, and if you got a private pilot curriculum already, guess what? Take that, compare it to the ACS, and say, we don't need to do that. We need to make sure we do, and it's a real simple product because the tasks are all the same. The tasks that are required for both, there's no difference.
What are the ones that you were excluding? So, like, for example, stalls or something like that? What are
Gosh, no, stalls are an integral part of learning to fly. You better be teaching stalls.
So what are we not teaching sport pilots that we're teaching private pilots?
I'd have to go back and look. I could rattle off a couple quick things like unusual attitudes, basic attitude instrument flying. I don't think there's any elements of that except for night. You'd have to go back and really look, and I haven't studied that lately. So just a few basic elements that are not required in both that you're going to be able to strip from sport pilots.
Because they're not going to be able to fly instrument no matter what. But then at the same time, one of the things I think I liked about the private pilot training is that they did expose someone to a little bit of the instrument stuff. That way, if they were to inadvertently going to IMC, they have some.
Well, so remember, absolutely, and there's nothing wrong with building a robust curriculum and having things that you think are important. You don't have to have just a minimum for what's required by the ACS. You can incorporate whatever you think is
You
of
don't need the
value.
minimum based on
Yeah,
ACS.
I mean, look, you want to be able to tout that you provide a quality training experience. And if that means adding a few things like that, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
That's awesome.
It's like spin training, right? People are afraid of spins today. I hugely believe in spin training. I can guarantee you any student that flies with me is going to learn how to spin an airplane.
There you go. All right, so let's go. We have some questions on the chat here. We're gonna do one by one here. So this is from Todd. What's up, Todd? Do dual received hours from a sport pilot instructor count towards requirement for pilot private certificate?
Yeah, actually, fortunately, just in the last couple of years, we got that changed where, yes, they do, in fact, those hours do count towards higher levels of certificates. They didn't used to, but now they do. Great question, Todd.
Where was I going to take this? As I heard a question about this where if a CFI is doing instruction to a sport pilot, does that I don't know. I've heard different variations of it, but yeah, it's a good. I don't know. I'm kind of
trust me. There will be nuances that will come up that we haven't even thought of.
Yeah.
That we're going to have to navigate through together and get the FAA's involvement and help to make sure we understand what is the right answer, because there are so many combinations of this that you can't anticipate every single one like you just described. But so yeah, we'll work through it together. We'll figure it out and make sure that it's communicated well.
This one's more, I guess, on me, but is Rudder marketing prepared to market this in the appropriate way to attract the right student pilot? So I have a question for you. So like, this is for our benefit too. So like, when you talk about sport pilots and all this stuff, who's the ideal customer for this? Is it
recreational pilot, someone that's always dreamt of flying for fun? Somebody that says, I have always wanted to be a pilot, not necessarily a professional pilot. Although I say that, and I've even now understood there are flight schools that have gotten really clever with the sport pilot for pro pilots. I'll give you an example. There's a flight school in central Wisconsin that when they have a student that comes to them that's very financially strapped, and they cannot afford to go get a private, then an instrument, then a commercial, and then a CFI before they can even stand a chance of starting to earn money by flying, they offer at this particular school sport pilot certificate, sport pilot instructor, hire them as a sport pilot instructor, which then enables them to financially support getting a private instrument commercial. So they literally get to that sport pilot instructor threshold to be able to financially be able to then pursue additional ratings and certificates, which I thought was really clever. I hadn't even thought of that until this one school told us about that.
I guess this is kind of interesting. Going rate for sport pilots. So you said the minimum hours is like 40 hours to get the sport pilot license?
No, by the regulation was 25, I think.
25, but on average, people can do 40 hours.
Or is it 20? I can't remember. 20 hours. I don't want to misquote. 20 hours by regulation. The reality is 35 to 50 is what we're seeing.
20 hours times $200 an hour, I'm assuming, roughly, depending on your school and the aircraft you have and the instructors. To be honest, that's pretty cheap. That's about $4,000. I don't know. I'm doing math.
Here's the best way to look at it. Take what you think it costs today at a flight school to do a private and divide by half. It's gonna.
Right. I mean, typically most people spend around 15 to 20 grand on a private pilot right now. That's the going rate. So you're saying that really for a sport pilot, we're looking at 7,000 to 10,000.
Depending on where you're at, depending on the airplane, the fuel burn, yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood. Our sport pilot academy here is $11,000, and that includes food, lodging, instructor, airplane. It's a 3.5 week turnkey experience. Now it's limited. We only offer 3 to 4 students at a time.
Well, let's break that down, because and one of the questions was, how do we market this, right? And I want to so you have a program for this already built. What does that entail? So it's you said 12 grand, 11 grand for this
$11,000, but that's all inclusive. That's lodging, that's food, that's everything for a 3.5 week stay.
And what aircraft are you using?
Well, right now, because we've been doing this for the last several years, we're using Skycatchers, 162s. We'll ultimately more than likely shift to something that's more 172-ish.
Okay. So probably technically now, with starting next week, you can use the 172, I guess.
You can. That's right.
Okay. There you go. So wow. So yeah, if you're looking to market your flight school to do this, I think there's different ways to go about it. One is looking at your ideal customer. So kind of what Sean's talking about is he's thinking a lot of it's not really your zero to hero airline people, but more so just people that are looking to fly. On the second way, the way you package it, you look at your curriculum, look at the ACS, look at the minimum requirements, and then you can market it as only selling it as a pilot license or as an entry step or stepping stone to going to the full ATP zero to hero thing. But they can start building hours if they get the sport pilot license, build 150 hours, and then do instruction, and then eventually build up to private instrument commercial and then ATP and CFI stuff.
If you have a dropout rate problem where you lose a lot of people that start but don't finish, switch to this and see if it makes a difference. I guarantee you it will.
But do you think it's a good idea? So if someone starts on the private pilot track, they're like, hey, I can't afford this or I can't drop out. Can they switch mid
Yeah,
curriculum and say, hey, you meet the requirements for sport pilot. Do you want to go ahead and do
absolutely
check
you
ride?
can. All that training that you've accomplished, all those logbook endorsements from an instructor that shows that you've achieved that training, that's all applicable to sport pilot requirements.
Hmm. Okay. So yeah, that might be another way to spin it too. Is like, hey, we're trying to get you check ride ready, but your funds are exhausted. Do you want to just
So,
try to move to sport pilot?
yeah, and remember, by regulation, you still have to have 3 hours of training in preparation for the certificate of check ride, right? That doesn't change. You still would have to. So if you had all the other requirements met and you decided to drop out of private and go sport pilot, you'd still have to go spend 3 hours preparing for that check ride.
It's different than the 3 hours you spent for the private, I guess. Unless your CFI writes something different. I'm not advocating that. Okay, more questions here. How many more hours are required for this sport pilot instructor rating? So I believe it's 150 hours, right? That's all.
150 hours is the requirement, and then the appropriate training and prep work to take the check ride. And that's not too bad of a process. I don't have an exact number in the top of my head, but just go look at the ACS and go look and see what it takes to actually conduct a check ride for a sport pilot instructor, and you'll see the tasks involved. You have to take a fundamentals of instruction written,
Mhm.
and then, of course, prep for the practical.
I guess you kind of brought the DPE portion of this for sport pilots, but that also applies for sport pilot instructor. So the DPE has to have LOA for sport pilot instructor too, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's pretty rare to find right now, or I don't know.
There's
Like,
some out there.
there's some out there. Okay.
And look, it's going to be a supply and demand thing. The more the demand goes up, the more you'll see supply becoming available because people will want to be able to take advantage of that.
I have seen we do have one school out there, and they focus solely on like LSAs, and they were like that's their model they went on. And they really want to capitalize on this MOSAIC stuff. So I mean that's the way I'm taking their school and marketing it, and like, hey,
Well,
we're looking for
so that's the
weekend
beauty of this.
flyers and all that.
Yeah.
But
So Tim, look at this is what's cool about this is everything they saw as a benefit, and then they went and invested in an entirely new fleet of LSAs just to support what they saw as a significant benefit. Now every flight school starting next week has a fleet of airplanes that are already eligible. They don't have to do a thing in the way of fleet change out or buying new equipment. They've already got it built in. They simply have to go get the curriculum done and go after it. It'll be a lot simpler.
yeah, um, can a CFI teach? That was the wrong one. Sorry. Can a CFI teach sport pilot? I believe
Well,
yes.
yeah, of course. Absolutely. It's in your privileges. What is a sport pilot CFI can't teach is higher ratings, right? So, and some of those nuances that we're still waiting for clarity from the FAA are like, can a sport pilot instructor that has high performance and complex endorsements then give those endorsements? We're still waiting on some of the answers for that
I
from
see.
the FAA. But bottom line is, yes, a regular CFI equipped to start teaching sport pilot next week or tomorrow. I mean, if you really wanted to, bottom line is you as a CFI certificate holder are eligible to train sport pilots right now.
Yeah. So a CFI is different than a sport pilot instructor.
Correct.
Yeah. So, but a CFI has sport pilot instructor privileges
Correct.
already. Okay. And then they don't need an additional exam to teach
Nope.
sport pilot. It's kind of the same thing
Absolutely
of
not.
like if you get your commercial, how did it define this right? So if you have your commercial, you do your private instrument, then commercial, and then you do your CFI, and then you do your multi C or MEI, then you automatically you can exercise private and commercial privileges for the multi, and since you did the instructor stuff, it already applies to. But it's kind of the same thing, but like
Kind of the same thing.
at a different level for CFIs with sport pilots. So
Look at it this way. Basically, I'm training the same tasks that I'm teaching to a private pilot right now, just not all of them. So same airplane, same tasks. It's just logical that a CFI could go be able to teach this without any additional requirements.
I guess, okay, this is more of an open-ended question. Do you think that the market really needs more people that are flying without a medical and doing all this stuff? Do you think that that's not right?
The data is clear. The last 20 years of the first generation of sport pilot, it's been very safe. We don't see accidents being caused by medical incapacitation for folks that don't have a medical. In fact, there are more people with incapacitations that have a medical certificate than there are that have occurred with someone that has a driver's license.
Fair enough. Everyone has their own opinion on that, so I'll let that sleeping dog lie. I guess the last question here from Tony. Does a sport pilot instructor require a medical exam? So he got a sport pilot already. He did it with the driver's license. Then he got 150 hours. He built it up, took a check ride. Does he require a medical exam?
Nope. Same requirement as sport pilot. Driver's license is your medical qualification. A valid current driver's license.
He says, "Wow." Wow.
So, it's cool. I mean, look, this is all about enhancing and enabling recreational aviation. It's really rolling back the clock to the 1960s in that sense of being welcoming in a way that everybody that has ever dreamt of doing this should be able to go do this.
And with limitations, I guess, because obviously you don't want a sport pilot flying the citations.
No, absolutely. The appropriate privileges and limitations that come with that certificate on that safety risk continuum are all in place. It makes sense and it works. It's very logical.
Wow. All right, so we're coming up on time here. You guys are asking a lot of stuff already on here. I guess we could do one more question. How would flight school cover insurance? We addressed the insurance stuff already earlier in this podcast, so we're not going to take that one up. But if you have questions on MOSAIC, if you have questions on sport pilot stuff, I want what's the best resource that flight schools and CFIs can go to if they are looking for more resources or more guidance on this MOSAIC stuff coming out?
Well, obviously, our EA pages, we've got a dedicated sport pilot and light sport aircraft section on our website. Just go to ea.org and take a look at that. Look at Sporties, look at the other providers of aviation training materials. They've got good information for sport pilot. Getting a hold of the latest airman certification standards, that kind of thing, curriculums like we talked about. It's the typical sources for aviation knowledge you're going to want to hit. The various organizations and their websites, the providers like Sporties, like Glein, like ASA, like others that will be able to also help as well.
Awesome. So check out EAA.org. You have Sean Elliott as well. That's on there. So you go ahead and check out the website, look at existing resources out there. I think that's kind of the best practice for now. If you have specific questions, I guess you can message, myself, or I don't know if Sean's willing to give his information out there. But yeah, you can message me and I'll try to relay that for you.
Perfect.
And then also if you have, anything else out there, just, feel free to message me and I'll go ahead and ask them. There's also, I think Raul is putting in the chat here, a document from FAA. So there's the MOSAIC final rule issuance. The official document from the FAA is out there as well. So read that one if you're looking for some guidance. Before I end here, Sean, is there any last things, any call to actions you want to, tell the audience that you might have, or anything they want to let people know before we close?
I hope this has been helpful, and certainly follow up with questions if you have them, because we want to make sure that we get them all answered and you have all the right information about what this really means. And like I said at the beginning, it's a game changer, folks. We're going to see some significant enhancements and revitalization if this thing goes off as we expect it to.
It's really exciting stuff. It changes the way we have to market, and really it opens our market to more people, I think. So I think this is exciting changes. A lot of it happens starting next week, and then aircraft stuff happens next year. We're going to go ahead and end here. So if you've been listening and you've been on here for the past hour, we really appreciate you. Like I said, EAAs, they do great advocacy for pilots and all that stuff, especially if you're building an aircraft. Just check out EAA. Now, kind of go back to our market as well. If you're a flight school listening to this and you need help growing and scaling your business, feel free to message us at ruddermarketing.com. You can also look at our phone. It's 314-804-1200. If you are also an aviation business or want to hop on the podcast, feel free to message me directly. It's info@ruddermarketing.com. So you have been listening to the Aviation Business Podcast. We appreciate your time here, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everybody.